the ANC. That's the Gauteng's elective conference, expected to begin today. But it's unclear when exactly the program of the day will get underway. Over 1,300 delegates will participate in the gathering, which will elect a new leadership that will be tasked with clawing back the continued electoral losses of the province since the 2016 local government elections. Newzroom Afrika's Ziyanda Ngcobo is in Benoni for us, and she talks to us now. Ziyanda, good morning to you. So this conference, the officials telling us a little earlier in the week that it is not going to be bogged down by issues of delegates who are meant to be at that conference. Essentially, the registration process, that's going to be done away with quickly so that they can get on with the business of discussing policy. Is that indeed what is likely to happen?
Well, Xoli, there's a lot that's happening, and I'm not sure whether or not it's a reflection of what you've just said about a smooth, process when it comes to delegates. Perhaps maybe that is one of the only smooth aspects of this. But as I speak to you right now, the Provincial Executive Committee is in a meeting. Last night they finished, in fact, well into the early hours of this morning, they were still meeting. And, where experience has taught me that once things like that happen, where as I speak to you, we don't even have a draft program for the day, it tells you that there's tensions behind the scenes when it comes to the officials of the organization. Another thing worth noting, Xoli, is still the high levels of securitization of ANC conferences, and Gauteng is seemingly no different. In fact, it is rolling over from what we've seen at the regional conferences such as Ekurhuleni, where the outgoing provincial chair, David Makura, described it as a war zone. Perhaps maybe I haven't seen as many guns as were visible in Ekurhuleni, but in terms of just getting into this particular venue, where before you could get to the venue, your car needs to go to a different area to be searched thoroughly for bombs and any other items before then having to be escorted by police to this venue. And then when you get to the venue as well, Xoli, it's not just the SAPS that's visible, but there's also what has now colloquially been known as the bouncers or private security dressed in black. They're littered all over this place. It also tells you about the tensions ahead of this gathering. As you've already mentioned, we still don't know what time the program is going to begin, if at all it's going to begin. And really, in terms of communication, that too is coming in drips and drabs, and really not quite the picture you would want to have painted on what is meant to be the first day of the start of conference.
Ziyanda, what you've just described there, some people will say, well, it possibly speaks to the sign of the times for this organization, the African National Congress. There was also an emergency meeting of its national structure, that's the NEC, Ziyanda, yesterday. What was that emergency meeting about?
Well, you see, they haven't quite come out yet to speak about that meeting, but I know that one of the items that was discussed were those 19 quarantined votes, Xoli. You'll recall in Ekurhuleni, remember, the conference results were announced where Mzwandile Masina was re-elected for a third term, but there were 19 votes that were set aside. Thereafter, there was a commission that was set up, led by NEC member Jeff Radebe, to deal then with the issue of those votes, because potentially it could have affected then the outcomes of the Ekurhuleni conference. Why is this critical for where I'm standing right now, Xoli? Well, because you'll know that in Ekurhuleni, it's one of the biggest regions of the Gauteng province, one of the 5 regions that is one of the largest, and it's quite literally almost split in half between Mzwandile Masina, who is backing Lesufi and Maile, and Dr. Kagaza, who is backing Banyaza Lesufi. And so so when we speak about the tensions, when we speak about even the emergency NEC meeting, it's to discuss then these organizational matters and the way in which issues are handled. So perhaps then the issue might not necessarily be around credentials, but at this stage it could also be around the program, the way in which it must go about its program, because how you also go about the program may have a material impact then on the outcomes of this conference, which is very hotly contested. Remembering as well, Xoli, that Lesufi and Maile and Lesufi is not the first time that they go head to head. In fact, now that Lesufi is the deputy chair, for him to get into that position, he won by only 22 votes. They're in the same position again, equally as hotly and tightly contested. And so the tensions then, this explains then just how much everything is being dealt with a fine comb. And as I speak to you now, as I've said, the provincial executive is still locked in a meeting, and for all we know, they could be debating the program, the organizational report, which guests should be invited to speak to this particular conference, the discussion of these reports. So many things could be part of the reason why we are experiencing the delay that we're currently experiencing.